District 11 is in full support of items 1 and 2.
That's correct.
Okay, great. Ms. Gruhl, did you have any questions on 1 or 2?
No, I guess on the second one, on item number 2, is there going to be an ongoing need after the grant expires in 2013?
Pardon?
Sorry. Is there going to be an ongoing need after 2013 for this particular project to keep that funding stream?
As you know, this is mainly for capital type of projects. The operation and maintenance, yes, there would be some kind of determination in terms of what kind of operation and maintenance fund that needs to be able to sustain some of this project.
And so this requires a 15% match for the $8 million, right?
That's correct.
And it says that between the other two, there's 4.6, so that's a larger than 15% match.
Okay. Some of these matching, which is, you're correct. Some of these matching funds are coming from various programs as well as in-kind service. So they could be a little bit higher because our in-kind service as in staff time.
Okay. And this says, it's great, CD, discretional funds that CD11 is going to put in. Was this part of a project that was approved under Prop O's oversight committee?
The Pico Green Street is not one of the Prop O project. Is one of the project that was developed from CD11 with the neighborhood council district proposing that particular project.
So, the funding from Prop O is funding that was identified for another project, or funds that had not been identified for another project?
The two project that's been Prop O supported is the Coastal Inceptor Relief Sewer. That project, yes, there is money allocated from that for the match, as well as the Bond Creek Watershed Trash Capture. There's already Prop O money identified for as a match.
Those were things that when we kind of the oversight committee and the council looked at, those were some of the programs outlined in the Prop O.
That's correct.
Okay, great. So we, without objection, we don't have a quorum, so.
We'll hold it until you get a quorum.
I have been advised by the CLA that item number 7 can go on consent. And I believe there's a note and file in here.
Item number 6, a request from the Department of Water and Power to note and file it. Apparently the file was submitted to the council inappropriately.
Okay, that'll be fine on number 6. Okay, then that leaves us with 3, 4, 5, and then we'll go to 8. Now I understand again from the CLA that we can consider items 3 and 4 together.
Actually, it's 4 and 5.
4 and 5 together. All right. We have reports on 4 and 5 today. Are they ready?
Yes, you do.
Okay.
Item number 4 is the Board of Public Works report relative to feasibility of implementing a green alley program for the city.
Okay. Hello, my name's Wing Tam from Bureau of Sanitation. Apologize that Commissioner Daniel is not able to make it this meeting, so we will cover for her.
Speaking to the mic.
Oh, I'm sorry. Wing Tam from Bureau of Sanitation. We are here to cover this item for Commissioner Daniels regarding the Green Street, specifically item 4 and 5, the Green Alley, and the porous payment. And basically, these two particular items is a consolidation of previous motion from various council offices. And the Green Street Committee that was initiated by Board of Public Works is developed a lot of these recommendations to move forward with this particular item. And let me give you a little background of the Green Street Committee so that you get a sense of how this was developed, a lot of these recommendations. The committee is comprised of basically interior department staff from Sanitation, Street Services Bureau Engineering, CRA, Building Safety, City Planning, DOT, Water and Power, EAD, as well as Rec and Park. And basically the committee's objective was to identify potential pilot projects to implement for streets, parkways, sidewalks, parking lots, and alleys. And one of the other tasks was to develop design guidelines and eventually down the line become standards so that we could identify opportunities with streets, alleys, to basically develop green infrastructure, as well as working with development community to be able to implement a lot of these initiatives.
Let me help you focus your comments a little bit. This is an admirable program, and I think it's a fantastic idea, and I'm really pleased that you consolidated all the motions. If you could talk to cost to implement some of these ideas and where the money will come from, maybe we can take it beyond just a conceptual discussion and tell us some recommendations as to how we achieve this.
Okay. Part of the recommendation is to, as you allude to, develop some of the cost structure for that. And our recommendation is to look at, in terms of identifying potential projects throughout the city and develop a cost structure and potential funding sources to do that. We actually have been working with some of the development communities to make potentially partnership with some of the alley that they may be developing. So part of this recommendation is to develop that cost structure. We don't have
Okay,
a full
so-
cost yet.
Okay. What I'd like for you to do is, how long do you think it would take for you to develop the cost structure? I think the program is fantastic. I think that you won't find a person in the world who wouldn't agree with the idea. But we are in some pretty tough times here in the city, as everybody knows. So give me an idea of how long it would take for you to develop some sort of a framework for how to pay for some of these ideas.
I'm Melinda Bartlett with the Environmental Affairs Department, and we're doing an aggressive program now to look at all sorts of grants and to evaluate the projects based on their water quality, their urban heat island effects and mitigations, and we're looking at all sources of funding. As you're well aware, the Metro Call for Projects is coming out. We think there are a number of projects that could be funded through that element. The Environmental Enhancement and Mitigation Program has released its call for projects right now. So what we're trying to do is prioritize all of the projects and pick off the ones with multiple sources of fundings. And it could be that even the base funding might be a street project, and all we need to do is raise a small portion through the grant to match it up. So the purpose of the Green Streets Committee is actually bringing 2 to 3 projects every month with their project managers into this meeting to evaluate it as they've been prioritized, and then determine what source of fundings we can go after. There is a subgroup within the committee that is specifically looking at things like Measure V from Santa Monica. They're looking at how the city of Ventura has a Green Streets program. There are a number of cities that have models out
So
there.
they're looking ahead.
We are trying very hard to look ahead and figure out how we can march forward, in some ways using our existing system, so that we don't have to create a monster to deal with these projects, or say they're just out the window because we can't afford.
All right, so if I understand you correctly, basically this is going to be kind of a rolling effort where you're going to prioritize your projects and then shop them through all available sources of funding and see how many hits you can get to be able to put together a package of funding to
Right.
move a project forward. Is that
Right.
am I
And
correct?
what we'd like to do is keep coming back to you
Yeah.
as the Green Streets Committee, at least once a year, hopefully more often than that.
Actually, I'd like it every 6 months. I think once a year is too long.
That would
Yeah.
be great.
Yeah.
Because we are making strides and we are working as these interdepartmental teams where we've never worked before.
Okay.
So if we can bring in DOT and we can, they have huge pots of money, how can we look at what they're doing?
The only other thing I would ask you to do is to maybe put out a letter from your committee to all the council members.
Okay.
Just letting them know that you're here, that what you're doing, and how they can have input, should any of them have projects that are currently in the hopper or have some projects they'd like to see put into your, portfolio
Absolutely.
for work.
That would be
okay?
great.
Yes.
So that everybody's fully aware that this is going on and that they can participate and push projects that you may not have yet considered.
The other thing that I think that's really important that's tucked in here is that we are trying very hard to get you standardized designed standards so that we can do curb cuts. And this, a developer or a resident who wants to make those changes would have a standardized set of plans that would be easily permitted, and they could just pick them off the shelf and move forward. And that it would create a system so that everyone can tap into those, resources, essentially. That environmentally improved project will be the standard.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you.
Yeah, no, I do. We, I think, introduced a motion a little bit separate than this, which was looking at green parking lots. I had a project in my district, Wet Design, that wanted to have a green parking lot and to be able to have multi-use for it, and it took, they came to me because they had been waiting for 6 months for it, and then it took us another additional 2 months. Because we were trying to do a citywide kind of thing and ended up making this a pilot program. But I think there are, and I think Ms. Perry was alluding to that, that there's going to be projects that are coming forward that are not alleyways, but are other items where we need standards so that if someone does want to go green in their parking lots, that we have the standards. And at the time, building and safety and planning were pointing like this as to who was responsible. And so we brought them all together, my staff did. But I think as you go forward and looking at funding as well, the most important thing is to develop standards that are acceptable, because the private sector may be able to move more quickly than we can on some of those projects. So is this group the one that is going to be designing what those standards are?
Right.
That's correct. The group is developing the design guidelines and standard for, just like you mentioned, easier to implement, so you don't have different department pointing fingers.
Okay.
That's correct.
And you should hold us accountable to
Yeah.
that. We'll
Okay.
move forward as
Yeah.
quickly.
No, it was frustrating because they really wanted to do this, and it was holding up their whole project, and they didn't want to put asphalt, but ultimately, and it was also bringing jobs. I mean, there's all kinds of good things that they were trying to do. So, in the ease of doing it, having standards that actually people can go by, because they also hadn't tested, the city hadn't tested all of the different products, which I think is part of what you're looking at. What is going to be amenable to us in going into the groundwater, et cetera. So I'm interested in hearing back as to where we are on those standards, as well as the overall program.
Okay.
So that we can, hold you accountable, push it a little bit more as we go forward, because it may be a little bit of time before the city has the money to do it, but there are a lot of businesses who are anxious to do this. So if you could keep me in the loop on that too.
We will do
If
that.
you could get those letters out to the council offices
Yes.
as soon as possible, I'd appreciate it.
Yes,
Okay, so.
we will.
All right,
Concur with the Board of Public Works
Yeah.
reports, in addition, the instructions about the letter and so forth.
and before we go on to the final item, item 3, I believe, is still outstanding. Is it item 3?
You could consider that on consent. I'm sorry, we probably should have considered that as part of the first item 1 and
You're
2,
right.
if you like. It's a $450,000 grant from Shadow Lake.
You're right, thank you. All right, without objection, we'll do that item 3 on consent. Now, we're on to item 8, which is the last item on the agenda. Is everybody here who needs to be here? This is what I want to suggest, for the sake of not having to go over what we've gone over several times. I think you probably now have a report that addresses the committee's concerns relative to the oversight component for procedures now. It's a full, complete report.
Okay.
Which, does this report include oversight responsibility that should be assumed by an independent or management department entity? Is that included in the report now?
That's our ethics liaison officer. She is an employee of the Department of Water and Power, but she's actually with our Employee Services Division, and she's independent and sits outside of either of the operating organizations.
Now, by doing so, does this move you away from a model where the employees self-regulate?
Yeah, what will happen now is the employees who are involved in either the development of any contract or the awarding of a contract, for example, they still will fill out the forms. The forms are then all submitted to our ethics liaison officer, and she will then look at those forms and compare those to the statement of economic interest. The Form 700 is on file, and also the outside employment forms that we have on file, to see if in fact there is any conflict, and if there is, she will then direct the employee be recused
All right. Now, did you also review with the city attorney and the Ethics Commission about the development of your new procedures?
Yes, we have. Yes, we have.
This is the city attorney?
Yes.
And did you
Yeah.
get approval, some sort of a support or approval? Obviously, you had input, but is the city attorney's office now at a level of comfort that they feel this can move forward?
Well, yes, we have been in lots of discussions with Leanne Pelham, Executive Director, Ethics Commission, and she, in fact, wanted to be here, and their commission meeting is this morning, which is why she's not here. And not to characterize what she would say, I know that she has said she's in favor of much of what we've done. Obviously, she would have things to add and so forth, but we think we're moving in the right direction with the Ethics Commission on this.
On the issue of non-compliance with the rules as you develop them, do you have any sort of penalties in place for those, for non-compliance?
Well, there's the form itself, which employees are expected to fill out, anybody involved with contracting. There are the Form 700 forms, which employees are required to fill out, as well as the outside employment form. So with regard to the Form 700, the Statement of Economic Interest, or the outside employment, employees have to report. If we find out that employees are not complying, then yes, there are actions that we can take. With regard to the screening form, which is the actual recusal form, and then the conflict of interest certification form, which essentially says, for the most part, I review this, I don't have a conflict, and the employee signs off on that. If, in fact, an employee does not recuse himself or herself, yes, there is action that we can take if we subsequently find out that they, in fact, did have a conflict.
And does that include penalties?
Penalties, do you mean disciplinary action, or do you mean?
Well, you know, when we don't file our forms on time, I believe we're assessed a fee based on a daily basis if we're late. Something
I
like that.
don't believe we have penalties. I'll have to defer to
Currently,
city attorney.
the idea was that any failure to comply with the procedure, whether intentional or not, falls into then just a normal personnel process. In other words, it's a duty of their job duties, and then no contract can go through even up to the Department of Water and Power if it doesn't have all the right signatures and they've all been checked anyway. So there's kind of a check. Nothing will get farther than that as far as accruing penalties because the contract won't go forward. It'll be a known thing. This person either isn't doing it or they've done it wrong. But the design was that it would just hook into the normal personnel procedures if someone doesn't follow personnel procedures as a condition of employment.
What I'm going to recommend today, and Ms. Brule may have some questions, what I am going to recommend today is that we move this forward with a review back in 6 months to see if it's actually working. And in that review, I'm going to ask for an assessment by the Ethics Commission and the city attorney to see if they believe that it has been effective in implementation and what results it has yielded. So, Mr. CLA, if you would make a note of that. I don't have any further questions, and even though we don't have a quorum, I will recommend that.
You can still make recommendations as a communication from the committee.
All right. Ms. Brule?
If I understand the process correctly, it's an ongoing kind of review. So, for example, there's current contracts that the city, that DWP has, and we may be having new green contracts, all kinds of things that are occurring. So you will kind of be checking on a frequent basis as to if there are new conflicts that may arise.
That's correct. In fact, all the contracts have to go through the procedure, so it's kind of a built-in checking procedure.
Even when we go to amend a contract, for example, it would go back through the same process.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, so recommendation, communication from the chair. We'll move this forward. We'll be back in 6 months. And prior to coming back, I'd like for the city attorney and the Ethics Commission to take a look and, again, review it for its effectiveness and an assessment of the results that has yielded. And we'll see if this has been all that we need or whether we need to add more. And I particularly note your comments from Ms. Pelham that there are some things that she may have wanted to add. I'd be very interested in the next 6 months to know what those were and to see if that, we can incorporate that. And feel free to talk to Jeff Catalano there because we certainly can introduce the motions in the meantime within the 6 months to have it all come back together as one package.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, this marks the end of the agenda, and we go into the public comment period. For those items that are not on the agenda, this is the time to come forward and speak on the record. Seeing that no one is coming forward, the meeting is adjourned.
Well,